Okay, I dropped my microphone. I don't know if it's going to continue working, but we'll just have to make do. So I just wanted to remind everyone that we do already have public production. Everything that is used nowadays, everything is done by collective productive labor. It is not done by some individuals. We do not build our own roads, our own private infrastructure. In some rare cases, it may happen, but most of the time, it is the publicly provided resources, publicly provided labor that allows us to have such luxuries as roads, etc., etc. They're not actual luxuries, and the means of distribution and the means of consumption are all private, meaning that even though we produce everything publicly, we consume everything privately. This is how people are able to accumulate an exorbitant amount of stuff and resources and use them according to their whims, not according to necessity, not according to anything, but their whims and fancies. And this is what Marx was able to point out some time ago, right? So he pointed out that we already have everything that is needed for socialism. We have publicly created necessities. We have publicly funded, publicly run institutions. Because in order to build a road, you need all kinds of people to participate, right? And in order for them to do that effectively, they have to sit together and plan. And in order to do that, they have to communicate to each other clearly, etc., etc. So we already have the means to start consuming publicly as well, according to the famous phrase, from each according to their ability, to each according to their labor, which is the principle of socialism. The principle of communism, as you remember, is to each according to their need. And this is what we already can start doing, but we don't. And mostly because the vast majority of the people are too afraid to actually admit to themselves that we have all the power, right? It's how we organize our society depends on us, right? And of course, because there is a whole complex that is created to make sure that people do not understand how everything is produced. So we are given these myths about how, without the investors, without the private capital, we're not going to be able to create anything. So therefore, it is necessary for us to have different forms of capital. However, in the Soviet Union, we already attempted not doing that, not depend on some kind of investment plan or some kind of foreign or some kind of outside entities. And it worked. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't. And I have this textbook that is pretty old, that was published in the 50s, as far as I remember, which lays it out very openly and clearly and transparently. I'm almost sure that the CIA read this textbook because it was based on the statistical data. It wasn't based on any kind of propaganda. Of course, there are some moments there that were not completely true. There were some ideological moments there because we were not post the ideological look at the world in the Soviet Union. This is why I insist we actually need socialist ideology so that we can possibly maybe someday transition to a scientific, purely scientific method. But meanwhile, we can rely on socialist ideology, which I do believe personally in the Soviet Union we failed to do. We didn't necessarily strive to build an alternative ideology except for opposing everything that was done in the West. But even when you look at a lot of those old resources, when you look at how the Soviet Union's economy was operating and how, yes, we still had commodity production, which means we didn't really truly, according to Marx, achieve socialism. But that would be, in my opinion, a very narrow view of socialism and communism. But that's a whole debate, right? People are fighting almost to their death to prove that this is the only way, or there are a few ways that you can build socialism. And I do believe that we need to be a little bit more all-encompassing. We need to look at a lot of other material data that has been added since Marx's death. And does this make me a revisionist? I already talked about this. I don't care. But yeah, we do already have the means to start distributing everything in a different manner. Yes, production necessitates distribution and consumption, but when you start taking the fruits of the labor created by the people and you start distributing it amongst these people, immediately you run into the questions that socialism actually is able to respond to. For example, how equal the distribution is going to be, why X, Y, Z people are going to receive less or more. And when you start running into these questions, this is where you can actually start building something new, right? The way you answer these questions is going to help you envision the possibilities. And when we have, just as I keep on saying, public production and private consumption, we are on this very, very narrow path, which is limiting very much not only to the imagination but to our material possibilities. It's not like everybody can just all of a sudden start a business, because think about this. If you start your own business, you need to borrow money from the bank, most likely. Then there's going to be an interest. Then your loan might not be approved, depending on your credit score if you're in the United States. Then you need to hire workers. You need to take on those risks. And then if your business doesn't do well, you are bankrupt, right? So after people try that, once, twice, maybe, they resort to selling their labor power once again. And when you look at the rate of entrepreneurs and how successful they are, most of those small businesses not successful. And I live in a city of entrepreneurs. Every second person here is an entrepreneur of some kind. And the vast majority of them are just doing it for the time being before their credit score is so low, even though we don't have the same system. But I'm just using this term for simplicity's sake. When they run out of funds that they can borrow, they just are bankrupt and they start doing all kinds of things in order to try and survive, which is really, really not ideal. And that is showing you that when you have this very narrow path, you're not going to be successful. You're not going to even be able to fulfill your own human needs, but you also will end up exploiting other people, and this is an all-around lose-lose situation. Nobody wins in this kind of a situation. But what socialist production is aimed at is not at winning, is not at gaining surplus value. It is aiming at fulfilling the needs of the people. Very plain and boring. And if we have people who are fed, if we have people who are housed, if we have people who receive education and healthcare, etc., then we have a workforce that is going to be much more productive and much more willing to take risks in order to do breakthrough scientific research, that are willing to do all kinds of more dangerous and risky endeavors, some kind of feats like travel to space, etc. And this is because the material conditions have been created to support such notions. And you cannot outsmart the material world around you. Just as I said, the vast majority of entrepreneurs, they fail. And I do know some successful entrepreneurs, but they work so hard and they don't even get to enjoy the fruits of their labor. And then I ask them, why would you even do that? What's the point of being successful if you don't get to sit down and enjoy the fruits of your labor? And that's the thing, because we still have, in this place at least, we still have some limited competition, which capitalism is very notoriously good at, is extinguishing and destroying completely and leading everything to this one enterprise and monopoly, just as I talked about last week. And yeah, it is only a matter of time before every single small business is wiped away, is taken over by a bigger business, or is forced to declare bankruptcy. So all of those little petite bourgeoisie type of fantasies that many people still hold on to, they are proven time and time to not really work, and they're so infuriating to look at because we already have the means, we already have public production. Why not make everything else follow suit? We can have acquisition be public as well. This is when we can start actually building better societies. And you know the rest of the drill. So I'm going to try and find this textbook and put it down below. It's pretty long. It's kind of boring. It has a lot of statistical data in it, but it's pretty interesting to read and see how the Soviets portrayed themselves to the citizens. because it was meant to be studied at high school and university, beginner university courses. So if I can find it in English, I'll put it in English. If not, I will just use the Russian version. But you can let me know what you think. I hope you have a great day today. Consider supporting me on Patreon. Do take care of yourself and your community first. Subscribe to me on all the social medias, even though I don't do anything there. And I'll talk to you sometime later.